Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hang On to Your Hat. Dad's in Lockdown, season 3.1. And I'm so stoked today to have in the studio, well, the space studio, if you like, the ether, Pete Richards.
Bad Daddy, you're a naughty boy.
These days, fatherhood is everywhere. You can't get away from it. Not that blokes haven't tried. If you're not a father, you've got a father. You're a son of a dad or a daughter of a bloke. But either way, being a dad is no picnic. The fear, the anger, the confusion and, well, the love, of course. Derek Myers and Dan Lee, together with their special guests, are here to share the highs and lows, the joys and the agony of being a modern dad. But most of all, to let you know that you're not alone.
What I'm hoping to get out of Pete is a bit of an insight into running a regional business, parenting in both lockdowns in Victoria, parenting an only child, and just what it's like living in a regional town and how it's affected the social interactions and life at home compared to what it was like, because Pete has lived a lot, grew up in the city and lived a lot in the city as well. So that's what I'm hoping to get out of him. I'm hoping he can get something out of us. So there's his look. I've got special graphics and everything. Sorry for the audio listeners. Hi, Pete. Welcome aboard.
G'day, Des. Howdy. How you going?
Yeah, look, pretty good. Pretty good. It's a funny old time. Where we are right now, I think the chronology of everything's so critical right now. I record a lot of podcasts for my business, and it seems that everyone needs to say where they are in time because it affects.
Oh yeah.
It affects the reason for bad tech. This particular episode of our podcast, Hang On to Your Hat, is a part of the Dads in Lockdown series, which is brought to you by the City of Yarra. I've written it down. The COVID-19 Quick Response Grant, which City of Yarra were kind enough to help us out, allowing me to send gear to some of the dads that don't have any microphones or any equipment, so that we're unaffected as to the diversity of dads that we have on the season. But Pete, what's happening out there in the country?
Oh, mate. Hey, firstly, I just want to say thanks for giving us a spot for regional Victoria too. But my heart goes out to all the brothers out there, doing it hard in Melbourne or whatever stage that they're at. Regional Victoria's been a funny kettle of fish. Like, we feel probably a little bit privileged that we've had less freedoms, but it has changed a bit over time, I think. The first lockdown was probably a little bit more full on for me than the second lockdown. I think that was also two things. I think psychologically you didn't quite know what that first one meant.
Yeah.
And so I have a hairdressing business in regional Victoria, and I live in Castlemaine, Northcote, and so
I claim to have thought of that.
Well, that goes without saying that it probably came from you, but I shut my shop completely at the time. Hang on, and
so you have an exclusive hairdressing salon?
Yeah, in Kyneton, half an hour away from.
Can I say the name of the business?
Kyneton?
No, your business is it? Can I say that?
Oh, Circus Hair.
Circus Hair. So if you're in regional Victoria, is it the Goldfields area? What would you call it? What do you call that whole area there, Kyneton and
I
Castlemaine?
think it is. Goldfields is a good. Yeah, it is. So shutting down the shop, kind of, as a father, I talked to Katie, my wife, and we talked about maybe creating a bubble so that as we went into homeschooling, that she was protected a little bit from the media, the idea of what was going on out there. And my wife works for council, so she was really busy. So I was in this space of full-time carer of Estella. Well, Katie pretty much has been locked down into her desk, and she's worked straight all the way through the first and the second, working from home. So look, that's brings its own challenges as a father and also as a partner in this space. Yeah.
So having your wife, partner, working from home, and you're in a business, you don't work from home, do you? You can do a bit of bass, and apply for a few grants, but in the end, it's not something you can bring home.
Yeah. So luckily, I got JobKeeper.
Yep. So
in that first week or so of the first lockdown, the anxiety just went through the roof.
Yeah.
It was a really challenging time to know how we were going to work through it financially. We sat down, worked out the budget. We also worked out a little bit of a strategy, like a thought bubble about how we would manage ourselves with protecting Estella from it as well. But it seemed like it was such a the great unknown at the time that I don't know. There was the tensions of having a business, which has you struggle, but then also as a father having to put the mask on that you're actually, everything's in control, everything's going to be all right, but internally that you feel like screaming
and how hard
into the bush.
How really fucking hard is that? Like, it's not something that everyone's talking about. That very early, I know you were saying lockdown 1 was more intense. Us Melbourneites, it's probably the other way. But we've forgotten that initial intensity that we'll never get again. Hopefully we'll never have that feeling again of going, is this really the end of the fucking world? Like, are we here
this has been,
on doomsday?
One of the great sayings that I've been saying, I've opened up again in my shop, but I've got clients and, it's a bit of hairdressing psychology, that you're having these conversations all the time. And one is that you can't make life plans in quicksand, and one of the deep things about being in a space where you've never charted that territory is that what happens is you're on it locking down, but also when it opens up, which it'll happen to you, there's the new normal that's happened, and it brings a different level of anxiety to you as a business owner.
Yeah.
And you're having to rework out how you're going to manage your time for your business, your time for your child, and also the time for your relationship as well. And without, trying to get COVID, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, well, there's that. And getting back to that point you made about deciding to create a bubble and deciding how much anxiety you want the kid to feel during this bizarre, unprecedented. There's a few big words out there: pivot, unprecedented, all the favourite words. And then realising as the weeks go on, this is really hard. We're in a pressure cooker here. We've got all these anxieties building up in a small house. You can't go anywhere. Yeah. And then boom, then your child can suddenly get exposed to stuff pretty sort of harshly, I suppose.
That's right. You're in a house. The challenges of running a house without COVID, how you intercommunicate in that with your own normal pressures, but that added on top. And then closing a business also in those other, first off, we went into, in that first lockdown in regional Victoria, we went into school holidays. So you were trying to fill that space with enjoyable things of school holidays, but then you went into homeschooling. And homeschooling, you know, I'm a 51-year-old dad, and it's been a long time since I was at primary school. So having to re-navigate that hat, that's a look, that was, so firstly, I think one of those things is in that first lockdown, you come with your own ideals about what school meant to you. And when you take that on board, you, I don't know, as a father, you can easily, I don't know, schooling is a completely different space than when we went to school. And you've got your own anxieties about, are they going to be all right for the future? And I've got to say, in that first lockdown, she handled the technology quite well. I was still getting up to speed, but also, you know, your own anxieties about being able to help enough in that space as well.
Well, I think that in your case, because your work you can't bring home, whereas a lot of people were bringing their work home, and or developing, like you're self-employed, you're in a situation where you might sort of pivot to an online business, or I know in my world I was still producing and editing podcasts from home, and you kind of found that all the meetings and all the ideals about, you know, schooling them kind of drifted out the window by the second lockdown for us. You know, we were
same.
They were kind of like, oh, let's just, you know, they're going to do more harm if we ride them. And I know in first lockdown, for me, the kids came to my work because I just built a new studio that couldn't be used. So the kids had a pretty nice, cushy place, you know, to do their schoolwork. And then, you know, my wife had a certain idea of what I was doing with them, but they were probably really left to their own devices. And I think they really came good. Like, I was really proud of them. Like, their technical advancement. They'd never had an email before this. They'd never done an online meeting, and they've just gone. They really ramped up their own abilities.
Look,
they mock you though. They'll turn around and mock you now. I'm already getting that. Oh, you silly old prick! What do you know about that?
I think you're spot on. I think that we're learning from them half the time. So, like you said, I think that sense of proud parenting too, watching them perform in that space, and they're unconscious to how well that they're performing. The hardest thing was knowing how to measure if they were or not keeping up with their own work. Look, the funny one is being all over it in the first one, you actually had more relationship to the communication with the teachers, so that you were more updated with it. In the second one, I thought, because my daughter was pushing back more, and I could feel the tension of her wanting to actually get back into a physical school space, that I think I just backed off a lot more. I don't know if that was the case for you.
Yeah, look, I think we backed up. Like, second lockdown for us, we was all at home. It was the proper pressure cooker, the Melbourne. Because we're in a tiny house, and we had a backyard, and I stood everyone in the backyard and said, imagine if we'd have moved to that dream apartment you kids wanted to go to. You wouldn't have this. There'd be nowhere to run and nowhere to hide, right? Just be thankful, right? And they're like, shut up. Now mow the lawn. But I guess the whole point is that when they came home, Fiona then went, right, She was like me at the beginning of lockdown 1. Right, here's what, I
Yeah.
bought all these books and I said, at the beginning of each day, go on to your website from your email from your teacher and write down all the things you got to do for the day, and then we'll be able to have a look to see if we've nailed it. And they got to the stage where they were just smashing them all out real fast.
Yeah.
So
So
when Fiona took over, when Fiona got involved, she's going, this is how we're going to do it. And it sort of felt like it was me and the kids sort of going, just give it a week and just, like the new carpet, shoes off kind of vibe. Like you'll get used to it. And
we had exactly the same thing.
yeah,
Because I went back to work in the second one, and Katie took more of a hands-on role.
Yeah.
And you were thinking, well, Estella's got this nailed a bit more. But look, it creates a different dynamic, I think. It creates you're having to renegotiate those new normals again. And that's been the constant startups, stall. We're moving forward, we're doing this at this stage.
Yeah.
And so I think in that second one, you're really trying to navigate your own interpersonal. How do we communicate with with my wife? How do I do it with that child without everyone screaming at each other? And
it's grade 4, isn't it? Is Estella in grade 4?
She is in grade 4.
Grade
and the
4.
other thing that I was going to say is the difference that we've also had, which is one of the things of living in regional Victoria, was one of the things that I thought was really important was to take Estella. My job was also, at the end of the day, take her away from technology and take her back out to nature.
Yeah.
And the things that I would see that would transform her was she would become a different kind of child after she was in nature for 20 minutes.
Wow.
So she'd start talking about herself in the first person rather than, about being in Minecraft or, it's such an inward world in that space.
And it's like, we're so desperate to want them to choose to do that and understand that they've got to get off the screen and go to nature and all that. But really, I just think it's just your job just to go ahead and do it. Not say, do you want to go for a bike ride? We went an epic bike ride today. Me and my wife and my daughter, right? So Tom was off on an adventure somewhere else. He's grade 6, so that's another thing, that the ramping up of what they're allowed to do. Independence is phenomenal and frightening. The first time, breaking news, I had the first experience of going down the road and going past a 7-Eleven and looking in to see if my son was in there. And I just went, oh my God. And it just sort of built up into this frenzy.
They don't have Space Invaders at the front of the shop.
It was just like, oh my God, that's it. That's that thing. And that'll happen with bars, nightclubs forevermore. It's like, I wonder if my kids are, oh my God. Yeah,
well, that's also what's going on, is there's a lean into, we're not quite there. She's kind of moving in that space, but there's a tiny lean into that movement towards puberty. And with that also comes this kind of emotional tirade at you. And not so, look, and this has been one of those great kind of spaces for us to kind of learn strategies in that. I did some, one of the early things that I did at the start of this year was, because she's 10, and look, I grew up in a family of all brothers, that I thought, and being in a house of all women, that I probably needed to have some support of being able just to kind of navigate that dad stuff. So I sought out a counsellor earlier in the year and I sought out an older guy, who's in his 60s. He he was a stay-at-home dad when stay-at-home dads were not ever, they weren't on the radar. And he had two daughters, and I knew them, and I thought, I think you're that bloke that I'd like to talk to.
Yep.
So at different stages in the COVID stuff, I did lean on him because so that you weren't always just defragging yourself with your better half, but talking to someone that was outside of that could give you some good advice. And look, some of the stuff that has been coming out of that in COVID has been a really, I'd hate to, like, deep personal journey, I suppose. That sounds a bit much and probably a bit heavy-handed, but look, it hasn't not been fraught with its own internal dark nights of the soul, I'd say. So and I'm happy to talk about some of that and how I can see some of that sort of inner work with talking to someone has helped as a parent.
And how good that you kicked that off at the start of this year. That's like, wow, amazing that you had that connection. So, Pete, when we all ended up living, lockdown 2 for Melbourne, when we all ended up living in the same house. Now, our house is fiery. I've got a 12-year-old boy, a 10-year-old girl, all practicing for being teenage nightmares. And my wife and I, it blows up. It's a little house. It blows up. So lockdown 2, it accelerated somewhat. And I think personally for me, I've gone, you're also, that responsibility you talked about before about protecting the kids from stuff. Well, that's hard to do because there's no going out of earshot. There's no quiet space in our house. But it probably, I'm not really into bright-siding COVID because it's not over and we don't know who we're going to lose and stuff like that by the end of it. Yeah. But I do reckon that, I don't know, I reckon I may be edging towards being someone who knows how to shut down. If I'm on an 8 of anxiety and tension, and I know someone else is, then you just go, I just can't. And
can I debriefed with that counsellor that I was talking about, one of the great, blow ups in our house as well. That I thought, I was talking about what had happened, and I said to the counsellor, I said, look, I went 5 to 11, and 11, full, DEFCON 5, where you want to be noticed, so you pitch higher than the other, and look, I do think one of the things that this guy said to me, and the second lockdown was completely different because it was like something cracked open in me. I said to him, look, I went from 5 to 11, and he said, you were never at 5. You were at 8, 9. And I thought, fuck, what? And look, as a coping mechanism, I took that on. I thought, oh shit, what? I thought my normal. I grew up with brothers. It was a bit Lord of the Flies, and we probably all met each other at 8. And so when you're in a melting pot, so someone says, turn off the iPad, and they go, what do you mean turn off the iPad? You need to turn off that iPad now. So that's 8. You're maximizing that. You'll meet that as a father. And this counsellor saying that to me, I thought, oh mate, I'm so out of whack here. I went back and I started to just notice what 8 looked like. But if I thought I was at 5, I started to see, what's my 2 look like? Or even without even connecting into the conversation, I started just kind of numbering what I thought was going on. And look, that's been revolutionary for me as a parent. I now can see Estella, I started talking to her about numbering system. I say, what do you think mum is when she's at the computer and you're asking her a question and she's got a deadline, and she'll say she's at 8, and I say, well, what do you think you are when I ask you to turn off the iPad? And she'll say, I'm at 2, and I'll say, well, 2. Why then did you slam the door and scream that it's not fair? And I'd say you were probably about 9. So anyway, that stuff as a parent in this space and learning how to, I don't know, read the room a bit more. And also what I've realized is I don't have to join her or my wife to change an outcome. So what I can do is I can sit with their opinion, still love them both. And when they come back down to a 2, we can talk about that stuff in a more healthy manner and know, and hopefully she'll know, or she gets from me, that I still love her. Especially my daughter, if she's in a crazy mode and I'm trying to calm her or to say anything, quite often those conversations get so misconstrued that you can't have a sensible conversation. And sometimes when you've got an only child, it might be her mother and her going at it, and sometimes you'll step in and both of them are one's busy from work, so she's tense. One's wanting to find her own independence, so she's tense. And if you step into that space to help and they're both at 8, I'll tell you what, you'll be at 8 before you know it as well. So does that make sense? Even
if you're alive. That's
right.
A lot of energy there.
So look, that's been one of the big learners for me. It's like the counsellor has opened up a possible superpower.
I like that. I reckon I'm going to use that. Might even get the number of your counsellor as well.
But also I'm trying to teach that and be with my daughter in that space, and that we can both, create more space for us to be around a 2 far more. And also realize that none of the conversations that matter when you're up around 8 or 7, trying to prove your positioning as a parent just doesn't help. You really need, for me, one is I end up either tipping over into wanting to be right and having some space for her to come back down, or able to talk to my wife in a space where I know we both agree and care and believe in the same stuff, and that we're there for that child. But when you're at 8, you can easily get misconstrued, and that you're both trying to kind of navigate.
And how crazy is it? How crazy is it that we understand when there's 2-year-olds, he'll be back. When there's 2-year-olds, right, 3-year-olds, the naughty corner, and then go to your room. You've got your head around this cooling off shit.
Yeah.
and then it just goes away.
Yeah. Well,
You know
one
what I mean?
of those
It
things.
dawned on me.
Yeah.
Sorry, it dawned on me, years ago, that if we were in a situation where we're out late, God forbid, with the kids, or we went, or carols by candlelight, or whatever it was, if you put him into bed, a few years ago, if you put him into bed after 9, I have this blanket rule. I've got no right to be upset by anything they do because I've kept them up. Like, it's my programming as a parent.
Yeah.
Like, it was our schedule that put them in a place where they lose their minds. And once again, that just drifts away. And maybe this whole COVID experience, this pressure cooker, has ramped that up in time. We're going to have teenage daughters, Naughty, before we even know it, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
if we
that's
can
right.
get our heads around, some of this stuff, because it's come to a head much earlier,
Yeah.
maybe
I
it will
also-
benefit and prevent, running away and off the rails isms and, things like that. Who knows?
One of the other things is, I think, one of those things that was pointed out too about creating space and not having to look. It's really hard not to come into a conversation when it's heated, and quite often it's heated in a way that you don't even realize that you're jumping into the conversation. And so it might be said in tone. Yeah. And so if you can number tone, like, look, I've told you 3 times today that you need to do something, but that tone starts elevating. And if you can pick that as a number, you can say it in a softer way that still has intent.
Yeah.
Now, but if you're elevated and your cortisol's off the charts, it takes 20 minutes before you're back in your body, before you actually can think rationally, or that you can just reiterate the love that you have for your child in a way that they actually hear it, or that they've brought themselves down enough too, and that they're actually in that space that they can you can give them a cuddle, you can tell them that you're there for them, and your wife as well. And hopefully one of those deep things is, the more space that I create for that, the more I see how tense my wife has been and overworked, and what an incredible job she's done in that space. And that actually I can make more room for her to come back down to where we can actually talk together as well. And that's what I mean about that thing as being a parent. It's both of us, but it's also that stuff as a partner as well.
And it's very, very hard. Yeah. Yeah. The cooling off thing's got to be it's massive. Like I've even started introducing that to the kids to go, all right, listen, whatever just happened with you and your mother was your fault. Let me make that really clear, right? It was your fault. You kicked it off. You did this, and this, right? I'm not cross, but I'm going to get cross if this ramps up, right? And then I'll be angry as well. And you don't want that, right? Yeah. But let me make this clear. Don't go sneering at her, mumbling under your breath. Let her cool off. Right? Let her cool off.
I'd even say one thing before that. Go to yourself. Even
don't
before
get involved.
You even say any of that. What number am I at? Am I actually, is 2 when I can joke around, or how serious am I in that? Is that, I don't know, having your own name, numbering and system for how you feel before you even taking that moment to say, oh, look, should I say this now?
Because you could tell yourself, because you weren't involved in, like, let's say there's a blow up. This is not uncommon, right? So there's a big blow up going on, and you're partly going, I'm so fucking glad I'm not involved in that, right? But then what I think you maybe don't realise is that you are, in the numbering system, you can't be, you're not human if you're less than 6, just from hearing it.
Yeah.
And then by the time you've got to the point where you say, I'm going to have to intervene somehow in some way, or it's going to ramp up and you're going to have an explosion, you're going in at 8.
Well, you do have to own 2 hats. You're owning the hat as a parent, that you've got your partner's back, but you've also got to own yourself as a dad as well, about how that your position on fairness as a father as well. Sometimes it can be both of them. Sometimes it can be that you're sucked into it and the kid's has got you rallied up as well. Or it can be that your friction, your ideas as a parent can be separate to your partner's.
Well, that's huge.
That's what I mean. Until you're in a safe space to communicate what you actually truly believe from the heart and having conversations from the heart, that's when, and they're in a space that they can hear it from their heart, both the child or your partner. That's the only effective place to be, isn't it?
It's very hard not to, like, if you think, you think something's going on, like there's a big fight going on, and someone's gone full rage, complete white rage, right? Whether it's the kid or your partner or both, or usually both by then. It's really hard not to say. You want to turn to the adult and say, you have to be an adult right now.
Of course.
And how that's just like throwing a bit of magnesium on the bonfire. Like, it's just like, it doesn't help. And it really doesn't help them feel they're supported, and it doesn't help the kid thinking, oh, I know exactly how to get dad on my side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's really hard not to do that, because you just go, it's an emergency now, I have to shut this down. But you can't. You really got to be one of those boxing referee guy.
Look, as I've been in that situation, one of the things is I always think it's about you've got to remove both parties from each other.
Cooling down,
as you can, as eloquently as you can.
Without a hose.
Probably the easiest space is the child to kind of, well, we've only got one. I don't know how it works when you've got more than one, but sometimes we've just got to kind of separate all of us, because it's not the time out for them. It's a time out for us.
Yeah.
It's a time out for us to kind of bring ourselves down and bring back our humanity, and that's the important thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
before we go, I want to go back and revisit the regional aspect of your lockdown,
sure.
just so that the listeners have got what's going on. So to fill everyone in Melbourne lockdown 1 was matched, wasn't it? It was the whole of Victoria.
It was, yes.
So what was that like?
Yes. Although the difference, I think, in the one is that we could have, you could have people. I can't. I'm not quite sure. The second lockdown. No, you couldn't have people at the house, could you?
No.
You had to have So it was full lockdown at the house.
Yeah.
And I could have worked because I was a hairdresser, but I chose not to manage with Estella, and because she was doing homeschooling and Katie was under the pump.
And do you have any staff? Do you have any? That decision, did it affect anybody else who wanted to work? Like, do you have any staff or anything like that?
I work with another woman, and she works for herself in my space, but it did affect us because she worked between Melbourne and my shop.
Okay.
And you could only have a certain amount in your square footage. So we chose to work on, when the second lockdown opened up, we chose to work on separate days.
Yeah.
So it did hamstring the business, but it was important for me to open up the second time because I could, because the core business had hurt so much from the first time. I had to make sure. So I'm open 3 days while I was helping with homeschooling, and Katie was working from home, and Estella was doing homeschooling, but she is now at school, so that's different.
Yeah. But so as you know, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about haircuts, right?
Yeah.
But it seems to be on everyone's lips, doesn't it? Hairdressing, and from the beginning of lockdown 1, it was all, it was a bit rough on people that worked for hairdressing companies that were forced to keep working when everyone else had to go home and be in the zone. It was kind of felt like it was going to be controversial, and then they got released from that. They were worried about losing their jobs if they refused to go to work in shopping centres and stuff. That was kind of harsh. But then, there's all this, yay, we can get our hair cut. And then it took me a while to sort of, even though I don't do haircuts very much, but
so look,
I kind of understand that
space,
need, that if you're in a cycle of freshening up how you feel about yourself every 6 weeks or something like that, cutting that down is another brutal, another
Look,
slash.
I think there's a couple of things. In a regional town, I don't know, like I've been hairdressing for, I don't know, I think it's 30 something years, and haircuts aren't just about how you look on the outside. It's also quite often how you feel on the inside. You may be looking at yourself, but it's about the continual conversation of your life. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
I've always thought that hairdressing is not just sculpting the form, but the words and the conversations that you'll have are like the conversations that you're having of your present and how you're dealing with what's going on in your life. So I think that's the joy of doing hairdressing. And going to a country town, it's a different feel because the conversations are different. There's a different community sense to what my battery's about to run out, Des.
You'll be right, but just power on. Yeah, 5%. You'll be right. 5%. I love that notion because I know your bio has like fine arts degree, I should say.
Yeah, that's right.
You went up and did to afters to do special effects, and you've done lots of incredible things. And to go back to it would be foolish to think going back to hairdressing was giving up on creativity.
Oh yeah, it's definitely
giving you that being able to bring the insights, the artistic sort of insights and everything, and even just thinking about your parenting journey, bringing it into that field.
Bringing it back to that question that you said about regional.
Yeah.
So being a city hairdresser most of my life, working in Sydney, working in London, working in around Northcote, Fitzroy, coming to regional town, it's a different. Everyone. There's a sense of the conversation is a deeper, more intimate conversation that I experienced than working in cities.
Yeah.
You do have that, but you're really privileged to be able to kind of connect into people's lives, and hopefully, they have connected into mine, but also I hope that I connect in a way that matters in theirs. That's what I hope my business is about, as well as, making really good shapes and making them feel good about how that they feel about themselves.
Yeah. there's that
So,
too, of course. And
yeah.
do you get some good insights from different?
Yeah.
Because being a country, sort of a top end stylist, but in a country town,
Yeah.
would be very interesting because you get such a wide variety of people all
You
telling you
do.
their stories, their insights into, if you say, oh, I've got a 10-year-old daughter, that might just open up some very interesting insights,
Oh,
all the time.
I think,
Free
and look,
therapy.
one of the things that you also find is you are always meeting in that space of what you know too. So those things about being a parent, you're always swapping your tips, or you're always talking about the conversations about how your kid's going with tech, or what the school's like, who's how they managing home learning. That might be intergenerationally too. That might be a conversation from a grandparent to
Yes.
their child, or it might be from a child to you, or it might be from the parent and you as their perspective, as on your children, both your children. So yeah, it's a really lovely, privileged place to be a hairdresser in a country town as well, and a parent, I think.
And I've got one final question for you.
Yeah,
It's not the jokey one.
yeah,
I've got one final question. It's just, being someone who grew up in the inner suburbs
yeah,
and lived in, London, Sydney, around the traps, in cities, and making the country move. We all know you never look back, and it's fantastic and all that, all us that haven't done it, right? But the lockdown, like I understand, my notion would be that you'd be living in the regional city and still have that umbilical link to go, Melbourne's just there. I'm 2 hours away and I've got civilization, or my extended family, my old friends, all of us, good times and all sorts of things. Yeah. When they cut you off, was that did that have some kind of impact?
That's a funny.
Or did it let you grow as a country person?
Look, the first thing that comes up for me is we've been here for about 8 years now, and over that time, over different times, especially in this COVID stuff, it's changed a deeper sense of my belonging here. And what I was going to say for that is, through this time, because Katie's at the computer all week, we've tried to navigate nature really a lot deeper than what we have over the last 8 years of being here. Look, it is a different pace. I'd say that starts to happen naturally anyway, because when I drive back to Melbourne, I start white knuckling it as I hit the service station just around Kilmore, I think. And the traffic starts getting busier, and, a lot of the old city stuff is not your interest as much. It becomes a different conversation. It becomes about the community that you have around you. Saying that, I've always felt like I'm a city kid in a country town, and I've never wanted to sit on a ride-on mower for my weekends, and I've always wanted to have a good coffee. And one of the reasons I moved to the town that I Castlemaine is, I used to have this theory that you can tell the kind of the heart of a country town by the conversation of the local town drunk. And the first time I came up to Castlemaine, it was some conversation of string theory, and I thought, fuck, I think I'm going to do all right here.
That sounds good.
So I think I've got the best of both worlds. I think I'm really lucky.
Yeah.
I've got a mixture of that, but I do, look, it's a different conversation, I think. And because you've got access to nature, it does, some of that craziness, look, like there's so much social media and stuff like that, look, I'm easily hooked into, but I try and defrag that in a way that just makes me have a different level of normal.
There's some great takeaways there, Pete, and thanks so much for coming on and letting us know what it's like to be you and do what you do, and some great takeaways. I might make some notes on the bottom of the in the show notes here, so that anyone that wants to work out your numbering system and the idea of talking to a counsellor.
I've got to say, talking to a counsellor. Look, that's like my new superpower that I'm trying to build as a muscle.
Yep.
I think it's a life learning for me. I don't think that I've fully, I don't think it's fully charged, but I'm trying to include that for a relationship, for even that conversation between me and Estella, who is my daughter, and my wife as well. So, it's still a muscle learning to be exercised, I think.
Good on you. And I look forward to the time that the lockdown's all completely over and I can talk to you in person for another episode of Hang On To Your Hat.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Cheers.
Super duper. Bye. Thanks, mate.
Oh.